we start the session, earlier I'm John Hill.
I got it.
To introduce Evan Peter. He's going to lead an informal discussion on traditional ecological knowledge. Start.
All right. Did we come up with the wireless mic as well?
No, I'll go ahead and get you
Okay.
the room mic.
Was everyone that was here? Were you here for the other discussion that I had? There's some people who weren't, so I'll just introduce myself briefly then for you all. My name's Yvonne Peter, and I come from Arctic Village, which in my language is called Vishenko. It's in northern Alaska, and served in a lot of different capacities up there. But I guess more importantly to this discussion, I grew up living a fully subsistence way of life from the land, and also within my community in Netsagwichin. You can join us in the circle. And it was actually earlier I just talked for about an hour about a lot of the things that I'm working on things, and so I want to leave out some things. And so if people in here talk about something that was talked about the last hour, then you could just throw in a question or whatever. What I really wanted to do is, rather than just talk at people for an hour again on subsistence and TEK and Circle 4 North, is I want to go ahead and share some thoughts to kind of just begin the framework of a discussion. And then I thought that everyone here, you're all carrying knowledge from different places, that we could just dialogue around this topic. And how long do we have? Till 2 or 2:15. Yeah, so we have about 45 minutes to an hour. And also, it was only I think yesterday or the day before that I was asked to fill in for Orville Huntington, who's from Alaska, with the Alaska Native Science Commission, on this dialogue on subsistence. So it's also one of the reasons why I would rather just facilitate than act like I had a 1-hour presentation pulled together on subsistence. And so subsistence is interesting as a word within a framework for Alaska, where I'm coming from. It's a part of a political struggle. It's also part of a struggle for our way of life and our right to our way of life as Alaska Native people up there. We're one of the only indigenous peoples in all of North America whose hunting and fishing rights have been extinguished legislatively through Congress. That was part of the Native Claims Settlement Act in 1971 that basically extinguished indigenous hunting and fishing rights. And it was a unilateral act of Congress. It also took most of our lands from us and forced corporate structures onto Alaska Native people, which has been a big struggle for our peoples ever since then. And there's a whole mix of Alaska Native people who are trying to make those corporations work, and others who are trying to have the traditional structures working. But on a practical level, we always know that there's the one aspect of kind of like law and legislation, then there's the other reality of how we actually live our lives. And for most Alaska Native people, I'd say, especially in the villages, maybe 70% or more of the way of life is basically a subsistence lifestyle, meaning that we're still living the traditional relationships with the land and the animals. Our water is still being hauled from the rivers and lakes and streams locally. For a lot of the communities, it's still buckets that are just hauled to people's houses and water. And the hunting and fishing way of life the survival is still based on fishing, hunting, all sorts of animals. Also, part of that way of life, which I think is related to, what the traditional ecological knowledge aspect of it is how we carry on those relationships with the land and animals up there. And I think about it within the framework of kind of like where Western wildlife management practices come into play in relationship to traditional practices. And within my own tribe, I know we've had situations where we're trying to break out some beaver dams along some creeks, because our people always traditionally did that to allow certain fish to spawn up some of the tributaries of some of the creeks. And the Fish and Wildlife Service is saying we shouldn't be doing that, breaking up beaver dams, but our people have been living there for long enough to know that we need to do that to ensure that certain species continue to regenerate themselves and are there in a lot of ways so that we can continue to fish them, or for the caribou herd, for example, so that the caribou continue to come down and we'll be able to continue to live from them. So that's some of the areas of subsistence and TEK that I wanted to bring up. Another aspect of it that was talked about both by the keynote presenter this morning, and then also I talked about some, was that one major difference I think in Western management models and structures is the idea that somehow as human beings we're objective rather than subjectively a part of the ecosystems and the wildlife, and the systems that are in place. And for us, within our own philosophy up there, we understand that we're just as crucial a part of the natural environment as any other aspect of it, as the trees, as the rivers, as the porcupine caribou herd. And if we're not doing our job that we're meant to do there, then the ecosystem begins to shift. So if you were to remove indigenous peoples, for example, remove my tribes from the porcupine caribou herd and the salmon and the whitefish and the graylings, things would start getting out of balance. Just like if you were to remove all of the caribou or something, it would impact that ecosystem that, as a place. And another aspect of subsistence, there's the political, there's some of the traditional management knowledge stuff, and then there's also the changes that are occurring that we're seeing up there. Having to do, I talked some about it with the impacts of climate change on the drying of the tundra and the forest fires that are taking out more trees than they used to. And that impacts, of course, the animal species as well. It impacts us. There's also the impacts. I think a lot of them are coming through climate change to the permafrost that are beginning to shift environments, the melting of ice. I know that in the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment that was done through the Arctic Council, they were talking about the probable extinction of polar bears in the next 40 years, as well as several other major species up there. And so there's a lot of pretty significant changes that are going to be impacting the subsistence way of life. And then on the larger picture, I want to just throw out for this discussion that some of the things that allow, for example, the Gwich'in Nation to still live in balance with the ecosystem of theirs. We haven't overpopulated the land base. Like my tribe is about 130 people, and you can go 70 or 80 miles in any direction, and all you'll run into is animals and land and water, and so we're nowhere near overpopulating the capacity to live in balance, basically a subsistence way of life from the land. When I look at the larger picture of like down here in the continental United States and huge or massive urbanization, and I think about this word subsistence, because ultimately we're all dependent on the earth and what the earth provides for us, and food, whether that's animal or plant life, to sustain us. And the questions of like really the reality that we're all, for our life, tied to the relationships that we have with the earth and the land and the animals, and really how are we carrying on those relationships. And I think that larger question is also comes to my mind down here more than it ever had in Alaska, because up there a lot of the overpopulation hasn't occurred yet, and so we're still able to live our traditional ways of life off the land. Down here, if the whole city of Los Angeles decided to try to fish and hunt for their own food, the resources would be gone instantly. And then there's also the question of where their dependency is on anyways from other places. So I think I threw out enough thoughts around subsistence, and then also definitely this morning around TEK. So with that, I think I would just like to throw it out there to the discussion if people feel like there's something that they would like to discuss or share with their own thinking around subsistence and TEK, or the circumpolar north. I guess I saw that I read that on there too. And then, or if you have any questions, because I think there's a lot of different people that are here with us that have a lot of different knowledge in these areas as well. So at this point, I just want to throw it out as a facilitated discussion. So.
There's something I'm really curious about. As a member of your own community, and also, I ask myself this as a member of a rural community, and also as a researcher from time to time. How do you decide? How do you know? I find it really hard to show, to validate that a particular person, if you're working kind of on an individual level, how do you decide and how do you validate whose knowledge matters in a particular community, in your particular place, for example?
How do we validate whose knowledge matters?
Well, maybe I can give you an example.
Yeah.
I've done some work in Southeast Asia, work that's some of which is funded by the three major conservation organizations, sort of the big three. And the question that I get consistently, one reason why my own master's thesis is, it's been more than a year or two now, is, well, how can you say you're trying to make the argument that these people's knowledge matters, it has something to contribute to a culture, to, in my case, biodiversity management. I'm curious about how others make that argument that particular knowledge in a particular place matters. What would you say to the question of that?
I'll throw it out to the crowd here and see if there's someone else that has an answer. If not, I can answer it, but
Yeah.
I do want to kind of try to make it so that everyone gets a chance to share.
Are you a part of the forestry?
For better or worse.
Okay.
Yes.
I saw a really great presentation by Steve Siebert the other day where he talked about Dowd. Have you seen that presentation by any chance? And I thought that that was a really great way to validate traditional ecological knowledge, where he actually took, Dowd said these things, and then he said, all I did was put numbers to that. So, I think that's a great way to validate, like, traditional knowledge, especially how to incorporate that into Western science, because that's what we really need, right, is numbers to put to validate it in our communities today, in the Western community. And I thought that was a really great approach to incorporate that.
Yeah, see, I don't want to say that we need those numbers. I'm coming from a very different paradigm. I'm looking for a different answer.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's right too, but I think it's that'd be a hard barrier to break, you know what I mean? But it's definitely
Anyone else have any thoughts on it?
Nice to come down to it. Hi, my name is Ernest and I like to talk. This is how I kind of think about how you say whose knowledge matters. Like, there's a difference between, like, in our ways, we're from Crow and the way we listen to people, we go by our elders and the ones that have been around the longest and seen it. But we have that system where it's just a small group, and we don't interact with a lot of people, so we know, who knows or who knows. And so that is a good question. How do you decide whose knowledge matters in a society where people come and go, and you don't know who's going to be here tomorrow and who's going to be here to stay? And so it's really hard to determine who's the elder or who knows the most, because it's like inconsistent. And where we come from, that consistency is there, and we know who to turn to in our communities. Because we don't leave, we stay in one spot. We don't ever leave except for to like go out and get supplies and come back in. Whereas the German Western society are more that it's more like, I say, the business side of it, maybe, the numbers, like you say, the numbers of it. And that's different every day. So that is a good question. Like, but on our side, when we see it, it's by our elders, and it's passed down to us. And we don't go in and out of our area. And so it would be really hard. That is a good question to determine how to. I think it's a really broad question, who you would look to for answers. But in our community, we have that in place.
How do you think an outsider, like, say, if you were coming in and trying to get knowledge out of a certain area, like, how would you think that an outsider would perceive
Like, this is a start here, because usually we don't really communicate like in this type of way where we all sit and talk to each other. It's really just two-sided, and we're trying to change that to where we work as a team, but we don't know how. It's just we have to learn first and go from our examples and learn every day how we did yesterday. So it's like a process that we don't know, but we could, like, if we have good intentions, then it would be. But as to who do we know for knowledge in the great society, I wouldn't know. But like on my side, that's how I would look
Yeah, that's something you want to add?
There would be the type of information that you wanted, what you wanted to know. And that respect that you have for someone and just going into a community or something. They would be building a relationship with whoever or whatever.
Right.
So I wanted to just add too, like, I feel like there's and this speaks to some of what you're bringing up, and this also speaks to some of what was brought up in the keynote this morning, which is the purpose of sharing the knowledge, you know, and there's been so much exploitation of traditional knowledge of Western corporations, especially, and businesses and people coming in, even college students. You know, my community, we used to have so many masters and PhD college students come to our community, want to study our culture, our way of organizing, our way of thinking and being, and they go off and get PhDs and write books and get big names, and like nothing would essentially come back to the community. And so there's been so much of that occurring, you know, within Native communities. You know, part of that question is like the question of the purpose of even validating or whatnot. And so within a lot of communities, indigenous communities, there's a lot of internal dialogue, I think, right now around that topic of what it even makes sense or is appropriate to share. And part of that is building relations, which is a major part, I think, of a lot of the philosophies that a lot of our people has come from. It is because of the experiences we had. It takes time to build up that trust, build up the relation, and then there's just sharing of knowledge that comes when there's a clear understanding of the purpose of things. But I think as far as validating traditional knowledge within a Western scientific framework, I think that you know, simple examples of knowledge that are okay, that, you know, have already been deemed okay by the different communities to share. I think, you know, Robin this morning outlined, you know, the reading of stars as one form of traditional knowledge to show its applicability in Western scientific frameworks. And I think that that's one way to do it, is through the demonstration of different knowledge. And then I also think that, you know, the greatest example is what you had brought up, which is the fact that our people are still surviving, and that the species are still thriving, and that, you know, things are still functioning within our communities. And it just didn't happen to be that way. There was actual practice engaged from our peoples in relationships with the different places, and that's why in a lot of indigenous communities, you know, we have what are called in English sacred sites that we understand have importance for a lot of different reasons, tied to the balance of the relations that we carry, you know, with the natural world. And some of those areas and those things are difficult to explain, and a lot of the struggles, I think, within the Native community stem from that place of where we have traditional knowledge and understanding about these things, and we know that these things are really important for us to respect and carry on. But it's hard to battle because the challenge that we constantly are coming up against is the dollar, you know, is the profitability and those sorts of things that are the major pushes in Western society right now. Even with Western science, is money. It always comes down to money and how much money can be made or how much more power can be demonstrated through the scientific developments rather than the greater good of the community or the relations and things like that. But yeah, that would be part of the way I'd answer the question around validating traditional knowledge. And for a lot of indigenous peoples, I feel like it's almost a situation where I've definitely experienced where I went into Western academic arenas or Western political arenas, expressed something that was based on traditional knowledge that was really clear and simple to me, but it was totally not accepted by that institution or that body. And maybe from an indigenous perspective, sometimes it's like we see it and we're like, well, that whole thing's going to fall apart in a couple of years because they're not setting some strong foundation. And a lot of our elders and leaders can see those things early on, but Western scientists and people don't accept the knowledge sometimes, and then we leave, and then of course the thing falls apart, you know, after a few years. But I think those are just some of the situations surrounding that discussion.
Excuse me, can I ask everybody to speak up? This air conditioning I'm fighting against, so.
I was struck by your comments about having so many master's and PhD students come up and study your culture and your knowledge, and I'm wondering if there's any bit of advice or perspective you could give to people, you know, I'm involved in the university, to better go about research in a way that would be more useful, helpful, productive, respectful, whatever.
Yeah, I think, you know, the reality of the situation in North America is that exploitation, you know, control and oppression of indigenous peoples, colonization essentially has never stopped. You know, people think that because in the 1870s and 1880s we quit physically fighting against European peoples here, that meant that colonization was ended and everything's okay, and like the building of the National Museum of the American Indian ended everything or something, and everything's all better. And the reality is it's not. Like for my people, for example, the fight to protect our Arctic refuge is a fight to protect our way of life, and it's wrought with this idea that the federal government has authority over the development of lands in my area because they declared that right through plenary power, which we never gave them over our peoples. And so I think that it's very important to understand that the historical and contemporary injustice and colonization continues within the Native community. And so the relations between indigenous and non-indigenous peoples in North America, this is all just my opinion, but is not healed and is not balanced. And so the institutional, whether that's federal or state or university, continued exploitation and research and studying and anthropology and figuring out how they can get more resources under our lands and all this sort of stuff is just a continuation of some of that colonial mentality. And I think that, you know, a lot of the work that I'm doing in the non-indigenous community is talking about how is really addressing that question of how do you approach healing of relations between the communities. And I think the beginning is to understand that it's going to take time to build relationships with the indigenous community. Second of all, part of that building of relationships is really learning and understanding some of what I just articulated. Why is colonization still alive today? And what are the factors still impacting our community? Why are we still struggling? You know, a simple example of that on a federal government level is like the federal government provides block grants to state governments, for example, to run social programs and things like that. They just give them a block and say, do what you need to do at the state level to help your people. With tribal governments, instead of giving a block grant and saying, do what you need to do to help your people, they develop really complicated accounting, federal application grant processes and mechanisms, and then when you even get the funding at the tribal level to help to work for your people, then it's locked into grant items. And the whole basis is that Indian people don't know how to can't manage programs, can't take care of our own people, and so we need someone to be dictating that to us. And us even being able to take over those programs didn't happen until the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. And so before the 60s and 70s, we didn't even have the capacity to run our own healthcare programs, our own education programs, and all this stuff. And so a lot of that is kind of just another example of kind of like this idea that Western knowledge and Western ways are so much advanced or improved, or that we don't have that capacity as indigenous peoples to do it ourselves. And so I think that the examples where I've seen the most success with European peoples coming in, American peoples coming in, Native communities, where they come in from that place of having spent the time to understand those things or willing to learn those things before they even ask questions about anything, and then also making an offering. Because for a lot of our cultures, there's the exchange that always occurs. And so there's one young man, a Jewish man that I've been working with for several years now, and when he came to me, the first thing he did was say, you know, how can I help? And so we put him to work for 2 months on the middle of a reservation when it was 100 degrees, building traditional shade areas and arbors and stuff to help with the community event we were doing. And he just did that without asking questions for 2 months. Then he came back the next year and he did it again for a couple months. And then he asked me, you know, would you be willing, this is a young guy too, he said, would you be willing to mentor me, to help, to train me in some of the ways of leadership and understandings of these things so that I could be part of this process of healing relations between indigenous and non-indigenous here. And I said, yeah, you know, you've shown that you're going to contribute to us in the ways that we're needing support from people like you that are coming to our communities, and we're going to be willing to share with you some of our knowledge as well. And so that's the framework of the context of like what I've seen healthy relations in that kind of arena.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
As you were saying, you'd like to see some change as far as researching on the reservations. A lot of the people that come and want to research the reservations, they expect things to happen like that. We do not move with time. Our time is different from your time in that you have to get to know us. You have to learn who we are so we get to know who you are. What are you wanting us to learn from you? What are you wanting to learn from us? And the communication is there. It takes a little while. So I think that's one thing that really has to happen, the communication.
A lot of times they've been exploited too, so they went out of their home and then they keep that games. I worked for Best Interest for Health for 8 years. And go and get consent forms and make sure it's okay with everybody. That once we get our information, we can try to go back to the community and get the information dispersed. It's not for the general people, it's for the reservations. So that's more important. Once you get the information, make sure you share it. Are you benefiting these people, yourself, or?
Yeah. just to expand on that, and I'll jump to you, is that that's a really important point, is ownership over the knowledge and the information. And that's also definitely something, like we even do that with the media now. That comes up to our place. We're like, you know, you're going to do a report, but we want all the raw footage and all of everything, and we want to be able to review what you're going to release before you release it about our people, so that we know. And not all media is cool with that, but and then we just say, well, then we don't need you in our community, essentially. And then, but the ownership of the knowledge is really important, especially with the Western researchers that come in, that whatever they do, that belongs to us in the end. So then they, again, like I said, it doesn't end up with them going off and becoming famous and rich and everything else based on traditional knowledge.
And you're saying communication too. A lot of times with communication here from the media, it's all the negative side. Nothing is really, you cannot find out anything really true until you really go there. You really learn from people. Take part. Talk with the leaders. Talk with them. Let them talk to you. Be open-minded about it. Do not close you. Focus on what you want. Rather than in the broader sense. That's what
I was going to say, I'm American, but work in Canada for Canadian Inuit and Inuit circumpolar league generally. But one thing that Canadian Inuit who have relatively strong land claims agreements and generally negotiations with the Canadian government relative to a lot of other Indigenous peoples is that under their territorial and land claims agreements, they have very strong research centers which issue permits for any kind of research that goes on in their communities. So those permits include a number of different requirements, not only prior informed consent with the people with whom you're going to be doing research, but also commitments to leave something positive behind in the community. And it's not only really physical things or labor or those kind of things that you bring to the community, but I think it's also just sort of thinking about using or approaching people that you would maybe research with from the kind of model and sort of requirements that Canadian Inuit make on researchers, is that going into a community can be a process of sharing and exchanging knowledge. One of the big problems, at least amongst Inuit communities, is that there's a real lack of indigenous Western scientific knowledge. There are very few Inuit scientists in Canada. And so going into a community and setting up a research project that isn't necessarily just you asking questions, but perhaps a collaborative effort where you maybe also share some of your Western scientific or Jewish disciplines, anthropological, or whatever research or knowledge with people in the community. So that it's sort of a way to, sort of a dual enrichment, if that kind of makes sense.
I think also another part that's really important that you reminded me of is that a lot of times too, other people's come into our communities with their own romanticized view of indigenous peoples or a savior mentality of coming on our communities as well. And those are also, I think, dangerous because the reality is our communities have a lot of struggle and challenges because of all the situations that we've been facing and continue to face, and that has to be also understood. So I have seen people come in and just it's like a doesn't mind twist on them, and they leave confused and not feeling good and disrespect and everything. So I think the more that some of those understandings and the approach is really important too.
I guess I have a couple comments and maybe a question. My name's Adam, and I teach geology and environmental science at Salish Community College, which is about an hour north of here on the way to Glacier Park. And I'm not from the reservation, but I've been there for about 3 years now. And a lot of the issues that are being talked about at this conference I can see those in my job. We are tasked with not only providing what's being called in here Western science, but to incorporate cultural values into our curriculum, specifically into our syllabus for each one of the classes. But we're not really given any specific direction on what that means or how to accomplish that. And so we've tried to have a few informal meetings about what does culture even mean. When we say cultural values, are we talking about Salish Kootenai and Pend Oreille values? Are we talking about tribal values all across the country in Canada? So that's been a real struggle for me since I don't feel like I'm necessarily part of the community, although I think I've done a little bit of what some of you said by just sitting back and doing my job. letting people come to me and tell me what they want me to know, in a certain sense. One other comment that you made is, and was discussed in the keynote, was traditional knowledge, what is okay to share and what is not okay to share. And somebody from outside a tribal community might think some knowledge is published, then therefore it's okay to share, whereas if it's kind of private, it's not okay. But in my experience, that is even not necessarily true. And it seems that to incorporate some of these elements into my classes, a good example of which is Devil's Tower National Monument in Wyoming, which is very interesting to me geologically, but it also has immense spiritual value for different peoples in the northern plains. You know, I'm struggling with how to present that. Am I even allowed to present it? Things like that. So I would welcome any comments to help you with that.
Again, I throw it out to everybody. Because I want everyone to get a chance to speak, sure. Yeah, because I'm really speaking a lot.
Okay, can I say something? So I was reading, okay, we have to say, okay, so you asked, what does culture mean? And like everybody has their own culture, it's not just indigenous people, it's everybody's culture, and it's kind of the way you look at the world and the way that you relate to it. And so, in like as students, and you say what's okay to share and what's not okay to share, I kind of thought about that too, you know, there's kind of like, it kind of creates kind of like you want to respect it, but there's like a fear of it because you don't understand it. Okay, so you don't want to disrespect anything by going too far. But it's just if you can do it if you do it in a good way. But if you go and you like make fun of it, or if you like make it to where it's not a good thing, then that's like gone too far. Or else there's like special roles that certain people play, like in societies. Now a lot of times I see that that's lost, you know, as to where the role between a man and a woman, and then a woman and their children, and a man and their children, and then like the roles, you know, we have those still intact where we're from. There's certain ways to behave and who you have to do, and ways, you know, just perform yourself, and everyone knows their ways to do it. But then that's kind of lost now, and so you kind of don't understand it. So you wanna do it in a good way. But really, when us students are going to school, we do it like this. Like, I'm just now starting. I'm not a very good speaker, but I kind of have ideas. And so, what's okay to share, what's okay not to share. And it's just that line between trying to respect it in a good way, and you don't want to make it to where people look at you and say, oh, you don't even care. Or, oh, it's like, that's not how you're supposed to do it. That's not really how it is. It's more like, are you doing it in a good way? And so it's okay to share knowledge as long as you don't disrespect it or like make it to where you're just trying to make money off of it. I think that's kind of what happens is what we see as when they try to make money off of something, then it kind of taints it, is that the right word? Where it's like not pure anymore. It's when they try to make money off of it. Whereas if you're doing it for the good of knowledge, then to share with other people, that's different. And so that's kind of the difference between if it's okay and if it's not, in my
Yeah, thank you. So, can you, those of you who came in, maybe join us in a circle so you can be part of our discussion? Especially if you're going to talk.
I'm from the Ecological, I'm a student advisor at the Business College, and I work with a lot of students, and I'm also learning how to conserve knowledge and ownership ownership, what to give, what not to give. And as we were doing our honors camp last summer, I began to find out that during the afternoon or in the evening, after classes, we would be finding elder. And what we would do is give the elder something so that they could share that knowledge with us, but they would only share just a little bit, just so that the students would know the basic of what it was. And each family, as I know, has like a cure for a certain tea or a certain plant. And so like if I go and start asking for them the reading correct, in a full culture, then we would have to, they would have to know who I am, what I want that knowledge for. If I want them to, for instance, like we have children that have colic, and there's certain people that can work on our kids and give them different medicine to cure them. And so those people, it's from their family. It's from way, way back that they were even handed down. So you can't just go and kind of take it from them. So that's what, I've learned, and a lot of the students that I work with, they have the same question that you were asking. And so we've been learning about that. And so far they've been doing really, really well. Like, they've really been respectful. They've been reading about the plants and our local plants and area. And so what I've learned is that, like what Jeff was saying is, you need to know who we are, we need to know who you are. And then so like the ownership thing is very sacred, because like I know, like with my family, we have certain medicines that people will come and give my mom or my grandma to help them out. So like if you write it in a book and people read it, it's no longer kind of like a value of it. It's like taken away. So like when people come to my mom, then she'll help them. It doesn't matter who they are, but it's just the way that they go about giving it to her or her sharing that. I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, one of the things, and both of you brought up, one of the things I was going to share too in reflection is, and you probably know it actually after living there for 3 years, or know some extent of it, is that within all of our cultures, there's protocols, that are in place, and ways of relations that are there. And probably after being there long enough, you start realizing culturally, and this is one of the things that's kind of hard to explain too, is that our cultures are living cultures that are basically intact, and the way that we carry relationships internally within our cultures, a lot of it based on clan relationships and family relationships, as well as roles and responsibilities within the community. My quick answer to your question is basically like, after having been there 3 years, you probably know some of those people in the community, and it's probably good for you to have local mentors, basically, older people who are carrying certain of those responsibilities among the people and have that knowledge. And my experience in working with a lot of Western teachers when it comes to traditional knowledge is then just not, you don't need to teach it necessarily, but you have people there that you can bring in from the community who can be the ones that are actually sharing that knowledge. And those people also know the appropriate ways to share that knowledge and those sorts of things. And so I think that's probably the approach to it. Then you don't have to carry those questions in your head, because then the community is the one carrying that responsibility. But how much time do we got? Okay, so short session. So we only had 45 minutes, but I just want to throw it out there if anyone else has any comments or last question that they want to ask that they really feel is important to them. I'm figuring this is a unique space where there's a group of indigenous peoples and scientists and students. So now's the time to ask it if you got a question that you really want to ask or a comment.
Well, I know our side, but what I don't know is like your side, okay, so you want to come in and gain knowledge. The idea that I liked was that there was an information center, kind of like that. But then, are you willing to come into you live on reservations, so come into reservation and be a part of who we are, or is it more like just trying to do it for like your paper, just, you know, is it from the heart or is it just from, you know, how can you determine that? That's kind of where we come from, we do it from the heart. Whereas sometimes when people come in, they just do it for the process to get it over with and then move on and they don't really, so like, how do we make it to where we all communicate in a good way and like you say, the healing of our relationship, we need to do that. We need to heal our relationship again. So how do we start healing that relationship, bring that trust back and, you know, and then so it will make it more comfortable for people to approach, to like share the knowledge, like how we're doing this now, we've never done this before, share knowledge, but we need to keep it up and continue it. And so how do we do that? How do we keep it to where that information is accessible in a good way and then where we can learn too on your side, you know, like that information center that you said, that's a good idea. Or, you know, but how do we continue what we're doing now is good, but how do we continue it to where it keeps going on, where we're not scared of each other. I think that's kind of what it is. We don't know each other, so we're scared of disrespecting each other, or the relationship isn't strong. How do we make our relationship strong when we do like annual meetings or conferences, like we're doing? Did I say that? Weird. Sometimes when I talk, it's weird. But basically, I'm just saying I want to make a relationship. And so how do we do that? How do we keep our relationship strong? You know, we have to start somewhere, and all of us together now, that's a start. And how do we build on that? And how do we keep it strong instead of letting it pass by and then in the end causing, because it's going to be a process and within years, there's going to be a great need for it, and then that's when we're going to step forward. We can build it now and make it in a way, or else we can let it go, and then when it happens, scrabble and put it together. How do we keep the relationship strong right now? What we're doing it is keep it. How do we keep communication flowing? I think that's kind of what we're see how to communicate. Yeah, science and tradition. How do we keep the communication between those two strong?
Yeah.
Well, I teach at two elementary school in Alabama, and I have also taught in an Aleut culture in Yukon, Alaska. I have taught in Yupik Eskimo culture in St. Michael, Alaska. And I have found that in my dealing with children, especially in Alaska, that that's where it starts, with the children. But part of the problem that we have to solve is that we have to teach parents how to teach children. Because there's this bond between who shall raise this child, you know? You have that saying, it's a village that it takes to raise a child. And so that's where I think you have to start.
So I think we've got time for maybe one or two more comments, and then I'll just kind of wrap up our session.
Oh, I don't know exactly what I want to share, but I just want to say thank you for, is it Elise? Erlis, for your comments and your willingness, because I feel like I teach for a program and coordinate at an undergraduate level, and we go with students to several of the reservations, and I have just been really touched by the people who are willing to share with our students. And I feel like the way that we approach it is we're not looking for a particular kind of knowledge or information. We just ask open questions, and I think that creates an openness for people to share with us. And then at the same time, we're putting on this lecture series now on Native peoples and conservation. And we have had Native leaders in a lot of different kinds of disciplines come and talk, or have expertise in law and science and language and culture. And I feel like there is an openness, at least in the 200 students or so who tend to come to those lectures, understanding that there are different ways of knowing that people have been a part of the landscape for thousands of years, and our history is really short. And I think there's this awareness now that, wow, it's very limited to even think about our own history if we only understand it from the last 100 or 200 years. So I feel an openness, and I just hope that people continue to want to share, because that's, we need to keep educating and build on that movement. So thank you.
So we have one more quick comment from someone who has a comment.
I'd like to toss a comment. I am an alumni of this program. It's called Wilderness and Civilization. And I think it's similar to a lot of what we're talking about here, in that the entire premise of it is to explore multiple perspectives and do so with the understanding that the objective is to expand your own perspective by adding to it perspectives of others. And I think that that is something that causes me and some of my peers and friends to be very fascinated by indigenous cultures, because it seems to be something that is more intuitive, and perhaps it's just because it's been practiced longer by your people than by my people. And that is the willingness to accept that what you say and you say and you say and I say and she says are all valid in their own right. And it's the integration of all of that that has evolved into the wisdom that we're now looking for from your peoples. And it's something that I think we need to encourage within all of our cultures as we share this place and this planet. And I think that a way to encourage the conversation between you and me and all of us is to continue to support your style of integration of knowledge, and to encourage us to understand that the validity of one person and one culture is not superior to another. And I don't know how you convince the Nature Conservancy that a particular group of indigenous people is valid, because their existence is what validates them. And it's so simple that people can't deal with that. Our tendency is to overcomplicate things to the point where we can't tie a knot. And so I think that the conversation is the method. I think the conversation is the openness. And I think as long as we keep talking, we're going to strengthen that. And the fear of each other comes from that unknown, which comes from the silence and the lack of interaction. And I don't think there's a complicated answer to it. I mean, setting up a conference is a wonderful forum for encouraging the conversation, but I think it's as simple as having a conversation, having a discussion versus a debate. And the exchange is the answer, I think.
So are there like organizations in place? Or should we make one?
So I think I know the organizers probably want me to wrap up the discussion, but I definitely feel like there's a conversation here between definitely some of you in the room that can be continued on outside of this space. I just have a few closing thoughts, but before I forget, I just want to thank you all for sitting here and being part of the discussion and contributing. I, for one, am not one who loves conferences where there's just people talking to me all the time, which is why I really wanted to try and make this where we could have some dialogue and share with each other. I think that, it's interesting. I was talking with some of my friends they're all indigenous people too, and we were talking around a table a few nights ago about some of the stuff. And there's one of the things we were talking about was prayer, and how in a kind of a Western sense, there's sometimes this idea that you can pray your way to salvation or believe your way to salvation, and we came up with this idea of like it's like. We can't pray our way to salvation or to the solutions to working through what we need to work through, but we have to live our way, and part of that life way is the prayer. And I think, in saying that, what I'm talking about is that it's going to take effort from people, and effort for, I think, people to come out of what we're comfortable with, because I think a lot of the changes that are needed right now in the world are going to take different communities of people and different individuals to step out of what they're comfortable with and expose themselves, what they really know and don't know, and how they're feeling about things, to really then move forward in building the open relations. And so I think that there needs to be that active creation of space. I also, when I was hearing you talk about the 200 people that are coming to these indigenous people who are coming to speak, and then receiving that knowledge, again, part of what I talked about earlier was like, man, you know, like in my own mind right away, my thoughts were, let's mobilize those 200 people to then, you know, support some indigenous causes that are happening locally, whether that's, you know, getting rid of some of these dams so the salmon can come back, whether that's, you know, helping to generate fundraisers for grassroots indigenous community organizations that are doing work on reservations with traditional knowledge or language or culture, or whatever it is, like, because that again, like I said, the exchange is so important. And I also, yeah, I think those are the closing thoughts that I'll have on it. But it's been a really good discussion, I think, on some of the aspects and the questions really that exist within the relationship between Western science and traditional ecological knowledge. And I think that there's no question in my mind about the importance of these conversations taking place, and then also action moving out of them at the same time. So wish you all well on your paths, because I'm done talking today.